It's a very interesting development that we are seeing. The Chinese have completely grind their imports to a halt in August. We expect also very low imports of US crude oil into China next month. And rumors has it now that potentially October will be a resuming month for China to go back to US for crude oil imports.
By August 2025, China didn't make a statement. It made a move. US crude oil imports to China, once 160,000 barrels a day, collapsed to almost zero. No press conference, no fiery speech, just a quiet 10% tariff. And silence. While Beijing was locking in massive oil deals with Russia, Iran, and Saudi Arabia, the man in the Oval Office was still yelling about tariffs like it was 2018, and tweeting about windmills killing birds. In Texas, tankers idled. Pipelines slowed. Ports sat half empty. And the deal maker, in Washington, he was too busy fighting Canada over lumber to notice the world's largest oil buyer had quietly walked away. Billions were poured into America's Gulf Coast, pipelines, tankers, export terminals. Not for domestic use, not for Europe, built for one buyer, China. Then in February 2025, Beijing quietly added a 10% tariff on US crude. Just 10%, and the orders vanished. No bans, no boycotts, no angry headlines. Just silence, the kind of silence that echoes across empty oil tanks and idle Texas ports. There was no standoff, no warning. China didn't need confrontation, they had calculation. They rewired their entire energy playbook. New long-term contracts, new pipelines, new port specs, all tuned for Russian and Middle Eastern blends, not American crude. The result, American oil was locked out, not politically, but logistically. Most of China's new oil deals weren't just signed with different partners. They were signed in yuan, not dollars. And that's the real headline. Because it wasn't just about oil. It was about currency. It was about control. Every barrel priced in yuan is a direct cut from the dollar's global influence. Every deal outside US banks makes sanctions harder, trade weaker, and American leverage smaller. While the US president dismissed the yuan as funny money at a campaign rally in Iowa, Beijing made it the default. Then came Iran. The nation Washington spent decades trying to isolate became one of China's top crude suppliers by mid-2025, shipping 1.7 million barrels per day. 10 times more than America ever sent. How? Through the Shadow Fleet, a covert network of disguised tankers sailing under fake names, foreign flags, and paperwork just fuzzy enough to dodge sanctions. And China's scrappy teapot refineries? They welcomed it. Cheap. Quiet, dollar-free. Let's break it down. America tried to block Iran. Iran bypassed us. China embraced them. And America, we just shouted into the void. Those multi-billion-dollar export terminals, once built for Chinese buyers. Now they're some of the world's most expensive lawn ornaments. Yes, US oil is being rerouted to Europe, India, South America, but let's be honest. No one replaces China. This isn't a dip in trade. It's a collapse of the business model. Even if American oil dropped to bargain bin prices, China can't take it anymore. The ports have been rebuilt. The pipelines redirected. The refineries retuned. Trying to sell US oil to China now is like forcing a square peg into a round keyhole. Blindfolded, while bragging you invented the lock. While Congress debated whether to refill America's strategic petroleum reserve, Beijing was filling theirs. Quietly stockpiling enough crude to cover more than 3 months of imports. Not with American oil, not with dollars, with Russian, Iranian, and Saudi barrels, all paid in yuan. The message is clear. China is building a system that doesn't need the United States. Back in Washington, denial. The White House still clings to outdated slogans from 2019. As if yelling, energy dominance, could plug the leaks. Even Canada, our neighbor and closest trading partner, has rerouted its oil exports. Why? Tariffs. Retaliation. What Reuters calls diplomatic whiplash from the 47th president. So here's the new map. China left. Iran moved in. India adapted. Europe leveraged. Canada walked. And America, we stood alone, shouting, we're winning. This wasn't a trade war. It was a quiet divorce. And nobody even asked if we'd be okay. The US dollar, once the bloodstream of global oil, is now just one option on a crowded menu. And not the preferred one. This wasn't a collapse. It was an evaporation. With every deal signed in yuan, with every barrel that skipped US ports, America's influence quietly disappeared. While Washington tweets about wind turbines and blames Canada for lumber prices, the world is laying pipelines, signing contracts, and rebuilding alliances that don't include us. They're not protesting. They're not slamming doors. They're just not knocking anymore. And the real danger, power doesn't disappear in a bang. It fades the moment the world realizes it no longer needs you. So here's the question. What happens when the world gets used to living without America? The answer won't come in a headline. It'll come in silence, and in contracts that no longer need an American signature. Drop your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe, because next time someone taxes trust and calls it leadership, we'll be here to break it down. And just when you think it couldn't get worse, Wall Street finally noticed. Oil futures linked to US exports began to dip. Investor calls turned cold, and major shale producers saw their credit tighten. Why? Because without China, the demand ceiling has dropped. And without demand, American oil becomes just another risky bet, subject to election cycles, regulation swings, and domestic bickering. Meanwhile, China isn't just buying oil, they're controlling the routes. They've bought stakes in ports from Sri Lanka to the Red Sea, from Greece to Brazil. They've locked in shipping lanes, storage hubs, and refineries. It's not just about fuel. It's about infrastructure. It's about command. Beijing isn't playing catch-up anymore. They're laying the track, and deciding who gets a ticket. And guess who's still stuck in the terminal? The United States. We're still lobbying over drilling permits, fighting court battles over pipelines, and subsidizing projects that can't get past environmental review. China doesn't debate, they build. You might hear Washington say, but we're energy independent. That's not the point. Energy independence means nothing if you can't sell it. Power isn't just having resources, it's being the one others depend on to get them. Right now, they don't depend on us. And that's the most dangerous shift of all. In 2023, US crude exports to China averaged nearly 500,000 barrels per day. By mid-2025, it was down by more than 90%. That's not competition, that's rejection. And this is where the global chessboard flips. Because every barrel not sold to China ends up flooding other markets. Europe, India, Latin America, now negotiating from a position of power, knowing America is desperate to unload. Prices fall, margins shrink, producers suffer, and the economic leverage the US once held vaporizes. At the same time, China offers oil-backed loans to smaller nations, but in yuan, not dollars. And tied to Chinese infrastructure contracts. It's not just trade anymore. It's strategy, oil diplomacy backed by real cash, and no US strings attached. The headlines might still say, US shale output hits record. But that's like bragging you baked 100 pies, and forgot to invite anyone to the dinner. America can pump all it wants. If no one wants to buy, what's the point? So now we face a question no one in Washington wants to ask. What if America is the last one to realize it's been left behind? Because this isn't about oil. It never was. It's about relevance. It's about leverage. It's about who shapes the world's next economy. And right now, the answer doesn't look like us.